Okay, let's talk about how we gear for our race fueling. And I think it's quite important to understand that this has to start now. It's not something that you can wait for. When it comes to sports nutrition, specifically gearing for a particular race, energy strategies, hydration strategies, these are things that you need to be starting now while you're building up to the big event. And Comrades it's getting very, very close. It's not so far off. And right now is the time you actually need to be practicing a proper approach to your race fueling. Okay, so let's get into it. First, I'm going to talk about the human fuel tanks. I think it's very important to understand this, how the human body works. So we'll talk a little bit about physiology. So if we have a look at the human energy system, and we look at what kind of systems actually provide energy to the human body, to the working muscles, we've got two primary fuel tanks. The one is our glycogen tank, which is our internal carbohydrate stores. And glycogen is primarily stored inside the muscle, as well as the liver. And you're talking roughly around 2,000 calories of energy. Okay, so it's not a lot. It's enough to do high intensity sessions over a shorter period of time. But glycogen tank is actually what we call the rocket fuel. So when you're burning at a very high intensity, you're burning off more glycogen. When you're hitting zone 3, 4, and 5 upwards, and we'll get into the zones, you're definitely burning off more glycogen. I actually call it your rocket fuel. When it comes to the other energy system, we're talking about fat as a source of fuel. And when it comes to fat fueling, I think it's important to understand that we've got about 40,000 calories worth of fat that is available to the fuel tank. And that is a huge amount. You could run multiple marathons consistently just on your fat tank. However, you need specific conditions to be able to tap into these different energy systems. So it's not as simple as it sounds. I'm going to just go burn off fat for Comrades. It's not going to work like that. Okay, and I'll explain to you why. So just very important to understand. There is a third tank, by the way, and we'll talk about that one a little bit later, but these are your two primary fuel tanks. Okay, so if we have a look at fuel tanks and we're talking about the different zones, and I'm going to utilize heart rate as a measure of intensity because that is definitely the most accurate. If we're talking about the different zones are actually a measurement of percentage of maximum heart rate. So it's not exact, but basically roughly if I'm talking 5 zones, which most of you understand, you're talking zone 1 being 50 to 60% of maximum heart rate, and then zone 2, 60 to 70%, and then you go zone 3, 4 upwards up to zone 5, which is 90 to 100% of your maximum heart rate. Okay, why is it so important to understand the zones and then to understand how this fits into place when it comes to utilizing the energy system? And it's very, very simple. Depending on the zone that you're training in or you're racing in, that is going to determine the kind of fuel that you'll be burning during exercise. Okay, and the reason that you need to understand this is because if you are going to be doing a specific training session, or it's a long run, whatever it is, you need to understand, okay, I'm going to be going out in maybe zone 2 or zone 3 mainly for this run. What kind of fuel do I need to take on to be able to support that particular session for that length of time? And that's exactly why we look at intensity and duration as a measure of what we're going to be utilizing from a fueling perspective. It's very important to understand that. And a lot of people get it wrong. Okay. If we're talking about glycogen versus fats, just to summarize, high intensity sessions will deplete glycogen at a more rapid rate. So the higher your intensity session, the harder you go, the faster you're running, the higher the paces, the more you're going to burn off. And in order to slow down the burn rate of glycogen, what do? You ingest carbohydrates. Carbohydrates break down very rapidly into glucose. Glucose gets pushed towards the working muscles. And so that's what we call an exogenous, taking carbohydrates from the outside in. And basically our glycogen stores is what we call endogenous, and that is supposed to be preserved. The endogenous system of carbohydrate stores will be preserved. So you're trying to spare glycogen, not burn up that rocket fuel, save it for as long as possible, by taking in carbohydrates from the outside. Failure to consume carbohydrates means that you will be burning off glycogen at a more rapid rate. And if you are performing at a very high intensity over a long period of time, your glycogen stores could deplete and you can hit the wall. So you can run out of energy. And that leads to a very painful situation. Lower to medium intensity sessions, so in sessions that burn where you're not going at a very high intensity, those would burn off a lower amount of glycogen and a much higher amount of fat. And we call that higher fat oxidation. So, and that would be at much lower intensity. So that's where you're looking at mainly zone 1 and zone 2. Okay. So if I have a look at the human fuel tank usage by zones, I think it's important to understand your aerobic tank, okay, which is primarily being supported by the fat tank, your aerobic system, is where you're burning off a lot less carb, okay? You're burning off more fat. So when a lot of people say, I'm going to just do a fat burning run, or I'm going to just jog on the treadmill or jog on the road, I'm just going to go and burn fat. The reason that they're able to oxidize a high amount of fat is quite simple. Aerobic means oxygen is prevalent. You're getting a sufficient amount of oxygen into your system. Your breathing is very slowed. It's not elevated. It's not heavy. You're getting enough oxygen into the system. And when you've got a sufficient amount of oxygen coming into the body, oxygen is required for fat to energy conversion. When oxygen is limited because you're going at a much higher intensity, and so you're breathing very rapidly, it's very heavy breathing, all that oxygen is really being diverted straight away to the working muscles. You don't have a sufficient amount of oxygen to convert fat into energy source. And so what's happening is the body's just naturally burning off glycogen as a primary source of energy, because that fat to fuel conversion just takes time, and you don't have a sufficient amount of oxygen to do it. So that's why low intensity training is, I wouldn't say it's easier to burn fat. You are in a fat burn zone. You are utilizing, or you have the ability to utilize fat as a primary fuel source. And when you're going at a much higher intensity, you're obviously going to be burning off a high rate of glycogen. And so this little infographic sums it up quite nicely. If you look at that arrow at the bottom where I've got low carb and high carb, if I'm going in an aerobic zone, my feed can be on the lower carb to no carb side, because I really am not requiring to spare my glycogen. I'm not really burning off that much. And so over the duration of exercise that I'm doing and the intensity that I'm going at, I'm not really going to burn off much glycogen. And so I can go the very low to no carb feed, and that will depend on the duration of that session. But as I move through the zones, as my intensity picks up little by little, what will happen is that I will have to introduce more and more carbohydrate intake to support that level of intensity, to try and spare the usage of that glycogen tank, because the usage of the glycogen tank is going to climb as I move into those upper zones. And that's why you'll see that arrow moving more towards the high carbohydrate side of things. Okay, that's very simple how the human body works with those two energy systems. So if I go back to the fuel tanks now, and I look at these different zones, zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and this is not cast in stone. This is just a rough idea of how to address sports nutrition. If you look at zone 1, you'll see that if I'm going for less than 2 hours and I'm in only a zone 1 effort, I could go on water really. I don't really have to fuel that session, okay? I could go with electrolytes and I could really, really maximize fat burn. If I'm going for greater than 2 hours, then I'd probably want to take on some carbohydrates, because it is a long session. And what will happen is you'll probably get some cardiac drift as the core body temperature increases over a period of time, because you're losing more fluid in the form of sweat. And we'll get into a little bit of that a little bit later. But as you're losing more fluid in the form of sweat, so what actually happens is your heart actually has to work a little bit harder. You will get some what we call cardiac drift. Heart rate starts to elevate, moves your drift into another zone. And now you start to increase your glycogen burn a little bit more. So taking on a little bit of carbohydrates is going to keep you a lot more stable. To make the mind and the body feel a lot better. And so I would advocate that for longer sessions, like if it's a zone 1 session, you're going to go very, very long. I would still take on a low carb. If you're going in zone 2, and if you're going in zone 2, I've got the same less than 2 hours. You could be also going just on water or electrolytes. Greater than 2 hours, again, low carb. But if you start to move into zone 3, you'll see less than 2 hours, I'm starting to introduce even carbohydrates now. And you'll find greater than 2 hours, definitely carbs, no choice, low to high carb. Zone 4, definitely carbohydrates all the way. And then zone 5, definitely a high carb effort, because those are very, very high intense zones. And you're not going to go zone 5 for 2 hours. You're not going to go zone 4 even for 2 hours, but you might be dipping in and out of those zones depending on if you're running up a hill, depending on if you're doing interval work, depending on if you're doing track work, all these kinds of things. And so I would say you need to look at your fueling around these. Okay. So just remember, carbohydrates are for better performance and better recovery. A lot of people say to me, why do I need to take carbohydrates if I'm only going to do a recovery run or an easy run? I don't just look at the run that I'm doing. I first of all look at the duration, the intensity of the session that I'm doing. I like to understand what my total caloric intake for the day is. Definitely, if you are going to do a fasted session, you are going to deplete or lower your blood sugar levels. So that might leave you feeling a little bit hazy. Most of us work, we still want to keep focused for the rest of the day. So in order to stabilize blood sugar, you should still take on carbohydrates. You'll never put on weight. It's not possible. And you're going to burn off that glucose. You cannot spike blood sugar when you are actually doing exercise. You're flattening that curve. You're utilizing that glucose anyway. And then it is a fact that ingesting carbohydrates during exercise actually speeds up the recovery post-exercise. And there is clinical research or the scientific evidence. There was a study done on ultra runners a while back where the more carbohydrates they took during a particular race, it was a long distance race, the more carbohydrates they took, and they compared 60 to 90 to 120 grams of carbohydrate ingestion. They found that those that ingested a higher amount of carbohydrates had much less muscle damage, okay, better liver function, so lowered liver function levels. AST was lower, LT was lower. We found CK levels were actually even on the lower end, so there was a lower amount of muscle damage, and we found that those people recovered a lot quicker. So one of the things that I know from a Comrades training perspective is everybody trains nearly every single day. And so you sometimes got to think about what is the next workout I'm going to be doing, and I need to recover very well for the next session to make sure that I can nail the next session, and then recover well for the next session so that I can nail the next session. So sometimes fasted training is not really a great idea, especially when it comes to back-to-back training. I would say that you need to pick and choose and periodize those days where you can or you can't do a fasted training session. At least then, if you're not taking something during a session, we also need to look at pre-training and maybe post-exercise recovery meals as well, because that also does make a difference. Okay. Just to speak about fasted training, I always put this slide up. Women should not train fasted. So if you're a female athlete, fasted training should be non-existent in your world. First of all, female athletes are way more efficient at oxidizing fat than male athletes. Women can burn off fat much more efficiently than men. It sounds crazy, but it's true. And they can benefit a little bit from carbohydrate ingestion. It would make it a lot better for them because females do not manage cortisol as well as men. What does endurance exercise do? Endurance exercise definitely elevates the stress hormone, which is cortisol. And cortisol is not something that we want to keep elevated for significant periods of time. It can create havoc with the body. Also, elevated cortisol for extended periods of time does a couple of things. It can break down muscle fibers. So it obviously will break down muscle. One of the things, okay, from a health and longevity perspective is, especially as you're aging, preserve as much muscle as you can. You need to bank that in a savings account and save it, because if you want to live, I always use this expression, to 100 like a 20-year-old, you need to look after your lean muscle mass as much as possible. Don't go and lose it. So by ingesting carbohydrates and reducing muscle breakdown, by keeping cortisol levels a little bit lower, you definitely are doing it, as well as obviously doing strength work and eating a sufficient amount of protein. And that's why doing endurance sport on its own without doing strength is a very bad idea, especially for an aging athlete. Okay, so what do I suggest? You don't have to fuel during a session. If you're a female athlete, I would say have a small carbohydrate meal Something small prior to a session, definitely do not fuel fasted. Again, you're not going to gain weight. You're going to have a better session. You're going to recover better. You'll put out better performance numbers. And if you do, you're going to burn off more calories anyway. So you don't have to worry. When it comes to men, yes, you can pick and choose those days when it comes to fasted training. And I would say that you really need to be very careful as to the days that you do pick to do fasted training. Because again, like I said, you need to look at the kind of sessions that you're doing back to back. And also the kind of caloric intake you're taking, through the day. One thing I can tell you about a lot of male athletes that I've worked with over the years is that when I analyze their bloods, and this is even in the young, I often see very low hormone levels. When we run a hormone panel on them, I see lower testosterone levels, and it's because they do hours and hours in the volume of endurance exercise, a lot of fasted training, very much often huge caloric deficits, not supporting what the body needs, catabolic state, and boom, lowered hormone levels. That means inability to actually increase lean muscle mass, because the triggering muscle protein synthesis is not really going to help much when you don't have enough testosterone, which is basically also one of those hormones that helps with rebuilding and synthesizing and growing muscle within the body. So you've just got to be very careful, and you've got to try and find that balance. Okay. Carbohydrates are not evil when it comes to exercise. They're evil when you sit on a couch and play PlayStation or Xbox all day long, or sit in front of a laptop all day long and not do any form of exercise. Okay. When it comes to selecting a faster training session, light to moderate intensity. So like I said, zone 1, zone 2, and I would say maybe short to medium duration, not longer sessions, only within those low zones. A lot of people always say to me, can you share the science a little bit? And to be honest, I'll share 4 studies. These are scientific research studies around the impact of low carb versus high carb, ketogenic, non-ketogenic, mixed diets, etc., in performance of athletes. So the first one was Finney et al. 1983, long time ago. But what they did was they took 2 groups of endurance athletes, and what they did was they gave the one a very low carb, high-fat diet, so it was ketogenic, versus a mixed diet, which is obviously a balance of carbohydrates and fat. And they found that there was no real difference in performance or endurance capacity on 62 to 64% of VO2 max. However, we know that 62 to 64% VO2 max is not actually very intense. So I push that one aside anyway. A lot of people throw that study at me. I'm like, well, you got to understand the intensity was not really great. But if you take Helga in 1996, 7-week training, smaller training adaptations after 7 weeks with a high fat versus a high carbohydrate diet. So those that went on a high fat diet did not adapt, did not progress as quickly as those who were actually ingesting carbohydrates. Those that ingested carbohydrates, their progress was much, much better. Fleming, 2003, they found that athletes, and this was in a group of cyclists, endurance athletes, but it can equate to any kind of endurance sport, they had small decrements in peak power output and endurance performance in the high-fat diet group, not even ketogenic. So high-fat diet, low carb, not even keto, their power dropped, where the other group that was eating carbohydrates, their power didn't drop. And then Zajac in 2014, also there they did a ketogenic diet and a mixed diet for 4 weeks in crossover design off-road cyclists. Again, reductions in peak power were observed after ketogenic diet. I've got another 9 or 10 studies I can throw in here, even up to 20. There's another meta-analysis that came up last year. And to be quite honest, there's one fact and one fact only. If you want to adapt, if you want to perform, if you want better pace numbers, if you want better performance numbers, carbohydrates are the king, and they're the absolute fuel to do that. It's not about body composition. And if it is, you still need carbohydrates, because carbs actually help with body composition regardless. But it really is about supporting the level of intensity and the duration and the training that you're doing. So carbs are not evil. Make sure that you actually realize that they're there to support the human body and provide you not just energy, but also aid recovery. They'll support the immune system. They support better hormone function. And so it's not something that you should just push aside and say, I'm not going to think about the kind of fueling that I'm going to be utilizing on a day-to-day basis. You really do. You need to pick your session, whatever session your coach has given to you, and you've got to say, okay, what is that session? Where's my heart rate going to go? This is how I'm going to fuel it. He's given me 400s on the track, or he's given me a pyramid set or he's giving me hill repeats, fuel those quality sets because it will make a massive difference in your ability to not just hit those pace numbers. I mean, if he said to you, run up a hill of a 5% gradients at 5 minutes a K for, I don't know, 2 minutes, and you do 1 or 2 reps and you fail, and you've got maybe you've got 10 sets of that, and you're going up and down this hill. The first 2 you die, and then after that it's just fatiguing. I promise you, if you feed yourself properly in that set, you'll probably push your best pace on the last effort. You'll nail all those numbers, maybe even better, and you'll feel a lot better. So don't neglect the fueling. Okay. Something I often deal with athletes is athletes like to try and lose weight while they're training as they're heading towards an event. And I think this is a very dangerous road to follow because some people put themselves into what I call an excessive calorie deficit, and this can lead to what we call low energy availability, which can lead to something called RED-S, which is relative energy deficiency syndrome, which means that you are taking in way too little energy in for the amount of energy that you're expending on a day-to-day basis. And this will definitely lead to immune system suppression. It can lead to illness and injury, and it can really prevent you from also hitting your training goals and progressing. I often see people like this go through what I call the rolling snowball effect. The fatigue sets in and it's just downhill from there. They try and get out of it. They get emotional about it. Oh, I'm not feeling good. I get emotional. There's no rest days. There's no change in diet. And they just keep on for months and weeks and even sometimes years. Same thing. Injury comes, injury goes. Injury comes, injury goes. Illness, injury, never consistency. Energy is better recovery, and it really does help for performance. Make sure that you don't underconsume food during your training phase. It's so important. If you do need to lean out for a race, first of all, the considerations that I look at is how far out from your race are you? And I think it's very important to understand that if you're very close, you can't. You can't be a few weeks out from a race deciding I'm going to lose weight. No. There you need to be eating in a maintenance phase. Whatever you're expending, you need to be putting back in because it's all about performance at that stage. And the minute you start to try and lose weight before a race, your performance is going to drop. So through that closeness to the race and into the taper period, there's no such thing as calorie deficits. There's maintenance. If you are far out enough from an event and you want to try and lose weight, then we look at a very slight calorie deficit, maybe 300 calories a day, no more, because 500 will leave you feeling hungry and depleted and fatigued. 300 will leave you feeling a lot more stable. So I always like to look at that sort of 200 to 300 range. You'll have enough energy to perform. You won't feel hungry. You'll sleep well at night, etc. And that's a lot better. But you've got to be patient because that will allow a gradual decline, okay, in excess body mass over a period of time. And you will burn off actually fat. You'll probably retain a little bit more muscle if you do it slower. And what you will see is that you just got to be patient and it'll be over a longer period of time. So that's something that's important to understand. And again, also what weight change are you looking at? If somebody says to me, listen, I've got Comrades coming up. I need to lose 10 kilos. I'm like, are you crazy? There's no ways you can lose 10 kilos between now and Comrades without doing it properly and with the risk of compromising health. If people go into these sort of crash things and they start to train fasted all the time. And believe me, if you train fasted, it doesn't mean you're going to lose weight because you're going to lose muscle weight. You're going to lose water weight. When you ingest carbohydrates, you actually find that your weight actually comes off. The healthy weight, the healthy weight stays and the bad weight actually comes off. Okay. So I hope that answers that question. I did see one pop up in the chat, which I'll look at. Okay. Sorry. I can't see. Okay, somebody asked how they'd be able to access it. Don't worry, we will send out a link to everybody to be able to access it. Okay, let's talk about carbohydrate fueling recommendations. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty of fueling. Okay, I spoke about low carb intake, sort of moderate carb and high carb intake. So this is the sort of low, moderate to high. So we're talking like maybe up to 30 grams of carbs per hour, maybe then between 30 and 60 grams is a more moderate, and then 60 to 90, and we even go higher, up to 120 grams of carbs per hour. I mean, that's really what we're looking at from a low, medium to sort of high ratio. if you're doing a marathon or if you're doing any kind of a race, you should never be sitting at ever less than 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Like that should be the bare minimum for that race. And the way sports nutrition works is quite simple. I always say to people, the most amount of carbohydrates that you can consume without triggering gastrointestinal distress is the amount of carbohydrates that you need to aim to take. If that is not above 60, then you need to figure out how to get above 60. Okay, and that is how you do it. All right, I'll talk about how you train the gut and how you can actually increase carbohydrate intake over time. We'll get there. But let's talk about the carbohydrates at the moment. If you just want to ingest 30 grams of carbs per hour, it's very easy. You can use anything because most carbohydrates come in the form of fructose and glucose. And basically, there are two different channels that are utilized, which are glucose and fructose transporters. And those channels have got sort of maximum volumes that they can handle on an hourly basis. The fructose channel we know is got a bit of a cutoff at around the 30 grams per hour mark. So if you're only reliant on fructose and you're going to go over 30 grams, you're probably going to trigger gastrointestinal distress. And that's why when people say to me, I'm just going to go and eat dates. And I'm like, okay, dates are very high in fructose. You need to see what the size of the date you're eating. There's also fiber in dates, the amount of fructose in there. Maybe you're going to overload your stomach, and maybe it's actually the amount of carbohydrate that you're processing or that you've got the ability to process from that source of food is actually quite limited, and it's not really going to provide you what you need. So you've just got to be careful not to overload those channels. Glucose, though, is limited to around 60 grams per hour. So many years ago, there was a study which decided to, maximize both channels. It was a 2-to-1 glucose to fructose ratio. In other words, you take 2 parts glucose to 1 part fructose, and that will allow you to consume 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. So if you get a product which has got glucose in and fructose, and the ratio is 2-to-1, that will allow you to take in 90 grams per hour. These days, we've got other ratios which have also been tested to see what those tolerance levels are. So we've got a 1 to 0.8 glucose to fructose ratio, which is a high amount of fructose, but with that amount of glucose, they've seen they can push the channel a little bit more, creating, they think, a little bit more gastrointestinal comfort. However, I haven't seen that to be the case. I think that people that actually take in huge amounts of carbohydrates and they're pushing that level, I still see GI distress, a bit of discomfort. And I'll explain that just now. And then there's also the 1-to-1. An interesting 1-to-1 is quite simple. I mean, I could probably go and put businesses out of selling product for this, but table sugar, just normal sugar, is a 1-to-1 glucose to fructose ratio. So you could take sugar and just throw sugar and it's 1-to-1, just as an example. Okay. But the reason that there are companies out there that design sports nutrition products like we do is actually to try and maximize the carbohydrate uptake with minimizing gastrointestinal distress. I mean, that's really what we look at. So a single carbohydrate source like a glucose or a fructose or a dextrin, which is also a single source. The dextrin is considered to be a glucose. It's not classified as a sugar though, whereas fructose and glucose are classified as sugars. And there's a reason for that, is that dextrins are what we call a polysaccharide, and then glucose and fructose are mono and disaccharides. So I mean, a glucose is a monosaccharide, so is fructose, but when you combine them together, we get a disaccharide, we get 2 molecules. Polysaccharide, like a dextrin, which is not a sugar, it's got multiple string of molecules on it, and when it breaks down, it floods glucose into the body. Okay, a lot of people look at products and they go, oh, I'm having this because there's no sugar in. But if you find that there's a dextrin in there, that is not sugar on the outside, but I can guarantee it's sugar on the inside. It's what I call a hidden sugar. So don't be fooled. When you get a sugar-free yogurt, I can guarantee you if a dextrin is being used in that yogurt as a thickener or emulsifier, there is sugar in there. Okay. So what's important, we call those, so when we combine more than one carbohydrate together, whether it's a dextrin with a fructose or whether it's a glucose with fructose, we call this a multiple transportable carbohydrate, okay, because we've got different sources of carbs that are blended together. And the reason that we do that is to maximize carbohydrate uptake and to provide gastrointestinal comfort. That is really the reason. That's why sports nutrition exists. It's there for convenience, but it's also there to make sure that whoever's using it doesn't get sick, doesn't get discomfort while they're actually doing exercise. All right, so if I look at this table here, you'll see I've got 30 grams of carbs, and you'll notice the timeline at the bottom. This comes from our sports science, by the way, Asker Jurkendrup. I need to give him credit for this table. It just really simplifies things. You'll notice that up to 75 minutes, he's actually said you don't really need, well, you could touch into carbs over 60 minutes, but you don't really need carbohydrates, depending obviously on the intensity. He's put there small amounts or mouth rinse. What is mouth rinse? Mouth rinse is, they did a research study many, many years ago. They took two groups of athletes and they gave the one group carbohydrates and the other group water. The group that had carbohydrates, they put them into a 60-minute time trial. The group that had carbohydrates finished the time trial first. All of them finished the time trial before the group that was doing the fasted session. Then what they did was they took the same two groups many weeks later, and they gave the one group carbohydrates again, knowing that it would improve their performance. And the other group, they made them put the carbohydrates into their mouth, swirl the carbohydrates around. They were not allowed to swallow, they had to spit it out. And guess what? They all finished at the same time. It improved the performance in the mouth rinse as well. What does that tell you? That tells you when the carbohydrate hits your tongue, the rev count is already going up. So it's short-lived though, because the body will eventually realize that you've tricked it. But if you've got a very short quality session and you really don't want to take on anything, you can swirl something in your mouth and it will override the body's mechanism for that short period of time, and it will give you a boost of performance. Just an interesting fact. Okay. You'll see at 2 hours upwards, definitely 60 grams to 3 hours. Over 3 hours, he recommends 90 grams of carbs per hour upwards. Okay. Comrades falls into the 90 grams, but we'll talk about that now because it's not 90, because it's not for everybody. Okay. Let's put this now into actual fuel tanks when it comes to racing. When it comes to racing, if we're talking about a marathon, if we're talking about Comrades, we're talking about an ultra marathon, we're looking at the different zones of intensity. There's no ways you're running in zone 1. So that can be thrown aside. Zone 1 is non-existent. I promise you, just standing at the start line with your pre-race nerves, your heart rate's already sitting in zone 2. I'm just joking, but for a lot of people, that already is the case. As they start running, that adrenaline kicks in and that heart rate is sitting up there. As they're playing Chariots of Fire, my heart rate, even as a spectator, starts to go. So I'm sure that that's the case for most people. But zone 2 is what I call the green zone. It's what I call the highly comfortable zone, really comfortable zone. How do you know when you're in zone 2? You can have a conversation. You can run with somebody and you can talk to them. But the minute you battle to talk, and when I say battle to talk, you can speak 5 words, 6 words, and then you have to breathe. You know you've moved out of zone 2. You know you've moved into zone 3. Okay? And zone 3 and zone 4, what I call the primary zones. That's where most races, marathons, ultra marathons are actually run. Okay? And so you've got to look at your fueling in the zones that you're going to be most primary in. At Comrades, there is no ways that you can stay in zone 2 through that day, unless maybe you're walking. But the truth of the matter is it's very difficult because it is such a long race. It gets so hot through certain periods. It's not a flat race, as we know. It's very technical. There's a lot of hills. There's an up run. There's a lot of hills, and they come early on in this race. And so your heart rate is naturally going to drift into those upper zones. When they do get there, yes, you could stop and you could decide, I'm going to go for a walk now, let it settle, and then carry on running. There's a lot of athletes that do that to keep their heart rate down. But you need to fuel for effort. And zone 5 is the death trap. If you enter zone 5 at Comrades and you're not an elite athlete sprinting towards the finish line, like we've seen in some years, then you are in what I call the death trap. You are finished. That is going to burn you so quickly that I don't think you're going to make it to the finish line. So that is like, you've got to realize where your cutoff point is. I wouldn't even want to go into zone 4. But some people can't help it. You want to try and stay out of that zone. To me, the zone 3 is really like sub-threshold, it's where you really want to be. And that's where you've got to focus your fueling. Okay. I saw there was something in the chat. Let me just see there. Someone said a doctor mentioned a mixture of 1 or 2 dates with peanut butter. Look, some people eat dates and they have severe stomach cramps. Peanut butter is fat. Fat's not going to do really much. To be honest, it's not going to really be broken down and utilized as a source. Your body's got plenty of fat in it already. I would focus on the carbohydrates and even just a little bit of protein. But when it comes to a Comrades pre-race meal, that's not good enough at all. Absolutely not. 2 dates is not enough carbs. Okay. So if I go now and I look based on that previous chart that we looked at, where is our fueling strategy for Comrades? Not less than 60 grams. There's no ways you're going to be here in this green zone. This orange zone is where you're going to stay. And so 60 grams upwards is where we're going to look from a carbohydrate fueling perspective. Okay, that is the recommended intake for race day. Minimum 60 or upwards. Okay. So some people say to me, how do you get to 60 or upwards? It's very simple. If you do a lot of fasted training and you're not used to taking on carbohydrates, it's not like you can suddenly go and say, I'm suddenly going to go and ingest carbohydrates now because it's going to work for me. It's not going to work for you because your body speaks a specific language. Your body speaks the language of fat burn. Your body doesn't speak the language of what we call carbohydrate oxidation. It doesn't speak carbohydrate burn. So I'm just going to use this sort of comparison. You go into a classroom, you're an English speaker, you go into a classroom, you're going to learn a new language, let's say it's Spanish, and the teacher starts teaching you first maybe pronouns, then maybe some verbs, maybe then some adjectives, and then eventually you start learning maybe some little small sentence structures. And so these sentence structures get a little bit complex over time. And over many, many months, eventually you start to learn this new language. And you start to become a little bit more fluent. The more you're exposed to it, the more you speak it, the more fluent you become in it. And then one day, so let's call that the fat burn language. Spanish is your fat burn language. And then one day the teacher comes into the classroom and suddenly she starts speaking to you in German, let's say. And now suddenly, like, you don't understand a word. I don't know what she's saying. She's speaking to me in a language I don't understand. So now you've got to start again, maybe with pronouns and, maybe some verbs and some adjectives and little sentence structures. And over many weeks and many months, eventually start learning this other language. And the more you're exposed to the language, the more fluent you become in the language. And that's like carbohydrate burn. So burning fat and burning carbs is like 2 different languages that the body has been taught over a very long period of time. We've got microbiome, we've got a circadian rhythm as well. We've got a hypothalamus with super charismatic nucleus in the brain, and we've got the central governor, and everything we do is habitual. And so the body gets into this routine of habit every single day. You wake up a certain time, you go to sleep a certain time, you get hungry a certain time, you eat certain foods, you train a certain time. All these things become like ritualized within the human body, and it becomes this sort of equilibrium for you. And when there's this equilibrium and the body is used to this sort of, it knows how to process, all the engineering is already there because it becomes routine. And suddenly then you throw a spanner in the works and it's like, oh, now what? All of a sudden this guy's throwing carbohydrates in my system. I don't even know what to do this. This is something new. I need to learn this new language. I need to make it routine. It needs to become part and parcel of everything that I do on a day-to-day basis. And so that's why you need to train your gut. You need to understand what the body's going to do. And this is what I developed many years ago. It's called the tipping point method. And this is to optimize carbohydrate intake for fueling for any kind of event. Doesn't matter whether you're doing a half marathon, a marathon, an ultra marathon, Comrades, an Ironman, doesn't matter. You need to utilize a system like this to understand what your body's capable of taking in on an hourly basis. So if you've never fueled before with carbs properly, you don't understand the mathematics behind it, you don't understand the science behind it, The best thing to do now is to start on the low end. You could start with 30 grams an hour or 40 grams an hour, and you clock feed. So if you're taking in 40 grams, you take 20 grams at 30 minutes, 20 grams 60 minutes, 20 grams 90 minutes. So every half an hour, you're taking in 20 grams of carbs. You take that in, you see, and you monitor how your body feels, how your energy system feels. You monitor all this, and you say, okay, I feel comfortable. That's great. Next time, maybe now you're going to take it to 50 grams of carbs per hour. So you test 50. Now you're taking 25 grams of carbs every 30 minutes. Okay, great. Take it 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90, whatever, 120 minutes. I had a great session, felt good, felt no discomfort, all worked fine. And then you're like, okay, 50 work. What is 60 going to feel like? You jump to 60. So 60 means 30 grams of carbs every 30 minutes or 20 grams of carbs every 20 minutes. You can, depending how you want to split it. Don't go 40 minutes. It's too long a feed. You want that 30 to 20 minute feeding window. I would say it's optimal. And now all of a sudden you start to feel a bit of gastrointestinal discomfort. You're like, man, my stomach's not feeling great. I feel a bit of discomfort. And that's because your body's not used to this. Okay. So you finish that session, and the next time you decide, okay, what am I going to do? 60 grams hurt me. You drop back down to 50. You train your gut with 50. 50 in maybe two sessions, 3 sessions a week. You put in at 50 grams per hour, midweek long run, weekend long run, 1 quality set maybe. You try and you see how your gut's going to feel. And after 2 weeks of sticking to that, you feel perfect. Now jump back to 60. And all of a sudden, wow, magic, 60 grams works. No issues. Why? Because you've trained your body a little bit more in the language of carbohydrate burn. So now you're at 60 grams, and now it's working fine. Okay. Now you want to try and see if you can push to maybe 70 grams. You go to 70, man, terrible, terrible experience. Back to 60 again. Train. Back to 70, terrible experience. Now you've got to ask yourself, okay, I trained my gut for quite a few weeks on 60. I was fine. I can't go to 70. Maybe I can try 75. But maybe there's something else we need to look at. And what we need to look at then is, what are the carbohydrates that you were taking in to get to your 70 grams? Were they functional in a way that provides maximum uptake? Did you have the right amount of glucose to fructose for your unique structure? Some people are fructose intolerant. Maybe the fructose level was too high. Maybe the glucose level was too high. And so you need to look at the product itself, ask the technical questions, and see if that particular product will meet your needs as far as providing that amount of energy goes. And the idea is to really try and train your gut as much as you can. If you take an athlete like Kipchoge, or you take any of these marathon runners, so these guys are sitting on anywhere between 90 and 120 grams of carbohydrates per hour. And if you think about it, I mean, these guys weigh between 50 and 60 kilos. That is a huge amount. You're talking about nearly 2 grams to a kilogram of body weight of carbohydrate that they're taking. So it's a really huge amount, but they've trained themselves and they've adapted themselves to a particular product. And for them, it works, So you just got to think about that. But this is called the tipping point. And the reason it's called the tipping point is that the tipping point is the point where you get maximum energy levels to gastrointestinal comfort. If you go over that tipping point, over that cliff edge, you're going to cause gastrointestinal discomfort. You're going to cause GI distress, and you don't want to do that. Okay. Somebody asked, is it not late to start training the gut for comrades? No, definitely not. We've got April, May, June. We've got 3 months to train the gut. 3 months. It's a long time. And you've got probably 2 months to get to longest run. A little bit less, maybe, for some. But I would say that you've got plenty of time now to start training the gut. Plenty of time. You've got so many sessions in a week. Utilize them to try and train the gut and really try and see what you can do to do that. So somebody asked, how do you find the balance? It's a very important question, actually. How do you know how to balance out fat fueling versus, carbohydrate fueling? Well, first of all, I can tell you this, that when it comes to fat fueling, most athletes are already probably fat efficient. most athletes are fat deficient and they very rarely understand what their carbohydrate tolerance levels are because they don't fuel enough with carbohydrate. So I would give the carbohydrate sessions a focus. But the way I break it down is this: very slow zone 1 or zone 2, short duration sessions. You can do more faster training sessions. If you're a female athlete, pre-feed, you only need like 10 or 15 grams of carbs. Go and do your session, then you will still burn off fat in that session. Okay. But if you're doing hill repeats or you're doing a long run more than 2 hours or 2 hours or more, fuel those sessions. Fuel those sessions. Don't do the long sessions without fueling. I promise you'll recover so much better. Whether you nail the nutrition in that session or not, you will still recover better from that session. You will build better towards Comrades. Your body will appreciate you giving it the fuel to recover through this training period. It's protective. It's not just there from a performance perspective. But definitely all long runs, I fuel all long sessions. Okay. I fuel all quality sessions. If I do an hour recovery session or an hour and a half recovery session, something easy, I don't fuel it. But the minute I know I'm doing something longer and harder, I fuel it. And then I don't always take on maybe 60 or 90 grams of carbs per hour. If I'm only doing an hour and a half session, maybe I'll take on 30 or 40 grams per hour. If I'm doing a 2-hour session, then maybe I'll go 60 to 80 grams of carbs per hour. If I'm going on a 3-hour or 4-hour session, then maybe I'll go even higher, depending on the kind of effort that I'm going to be putting in. But that's really the way to break it down. Okay. I'm going to answer this, Katleo. I'm going to answer your question a bit later because it is a very valid question. But we're going to talk about product now. So now that we understand carbohydrates, and by the way, carbohydrate intake is just pure mathematics. Sports nutrition is actually maths. If you can add 1 + 1 = 2, you'll be an expert at being able to decide how to fuel your race. It's quite easy. So I'm looking here I'm not interested in 30 grams. Let's have a look at 60 grams. 60 grams per hour is actually 240 calories. So some products do have a little bit of protein or whatever in it and some carbs, but you can always look at 240 calories because 1 gram is 4 calories. So, that's how we work it out. But obviously, predominantly, you want to take in carbohydrates. And we work out, on an hourly basis, how much to take in per hour. I call what you take in, okay, from what you're consuming, I call that the fuel dispenser. That can be a bottle, that can be a bladder, that can be gels or chews, it can be anything, a bar, it doesn't matter. That is your fuel dispensing mechanism. This is the mechanism that I'm using to get the fuel in. So that's the first thing. Okay. The second thing is sorry, I've gone back here. Okay. Right. Now I'm going to shock you because this is probably something that you didn't expect, but I've obviously used the 32 GR products and I want to show you what it means to take in 60 grams of carbs per hour utilizing 32 GR products. If I look at a snap gel, which are actually en route at Comrades, to get in 60 grams per hour, I need to consume 1 gel every 22 minutes. So it's basically 3 an hour. Every 20 minutes, snap gel, snap gel, snap gel. That's 60 grams per hour. Okay, but maybe somebody's going to take an energy drink en route. And so maybe they only need 1 gel at 30 minutes, 1 gel at 60 minutes, and an energy drink in between because that's also got carbohydrates in, and that will add up to the 60 grams. So remember what I said, the dispensing, the fuel dispenser, is it liquid, is it solid, is it a gel, is it a bar? All of these need to be added together to determine what that hourly intake is. I like to keep things very simple. I usually stick to 1 or 2 products max. I don't go mad because the minute you go mad with a whole lot of products, what you'll find is that it becomes a very, very difficult thing to measure. Sorry, just give me 1 second. My daughter's phoned me about 10 times. I'm just telling her I'm on a webinar, just reminding her. Okay. So a sports chews, 1 bar every 30 minutes. That's 2 bars an hour. 2 whole bars. I know people that eat like 1 block or 2 blocks every 20 or 30 minutes. It's not enough. A bar is about 33 grams of carbs. So if you take 2 in an hour, you get about 66 grams. But what are you taking with a bar? Are you taking an energy drink? Okay, you need to think about that. And then I've broken down the powder drinks into scoops. How many scoops of powder? Race per gel. It's a hot. If you want to get 60 grams in a race per gel, you basically got to finish a race per gel by 75 minutes. So it's a third, a third, a third. 25 minutes, 25 minutes, 20. That will give you. It's a 75 gram gel. So you're talking about a gram a minute, basically. And so you'd finish it over 70 minutes. That's how we work it out. Just simple mathematics. So this is really how it works. The reason I said these crosses are here, these crosses are actually, they should be removed. The sports chews and the drink can support 90 grams. Chewable tablets, forget it. I mean, look at this. 60 grams of carbs for chewable tabs. I would need to consume an entire tube every 45 minutes, basically. Like a whole tube of 10 tablets. That is crazy. There's too little carbohydrates in a single tablet to have an impact on your total caloric requirement for an hour. I mean, you could have it and suck on it, but you'd need to take other energy products along with it. Okay, you can't have that on its own. I'll answer that question just now. Sorry, there are a few questions that popped up in the chat. One was more about training. Someone said, can I use the chewable tabs instead of gels? One chewable tab, you would need 4 chewable tabs. No, 5 chewable tabs is 1 gel. 5 tablets is 1 gel. So can you eat 5 tablets every 20 minutes? Because that's really what you're going to have to do. It's not convenient. It's not convenient. Okay. What's your take on mixing Coke and potatoes in between? Potatoes are great. Potatoes are a great carbohydrate source, but you need to add it into the mathematics of your total carbohydrate intake. You can't go and say, I am going to have a potato. How much potato you're going to have, and how is the timing going to work of that potato with everything else you're taking? Because you can overdo it or you can underdo it, and you need to make sure you get it right. Somebody asked about Coke. First of all, I don't think there is any Coke en route at Comrades, to be honest. But if you're talking about Coke, you've got a problem. The problem for me is not the sugar. Sugar. The problem for me is the caffeine. The minute you take on caffeine and you don't get caffeine in again, caffeine reaches peak concentration levels in 60 minutes. So I don't know if you've ever seen that people take something, man, that Coke makes me feel good. And then an hour later, they feel absolutely shocking because they hit the downer and they hit it down badly. Once you start taking on caffeine, you have to keep taking on caffeine. You can't just stop it. Okay, so we'll talk about caffeine intake later, but it's something that's very important to discuss. Okay. Let's talk about hydration because we need to keep energy and hydration separate. Okay, so first of all, hydration is obviously calculated on a number of things. The temperature you're going to be running in or training in, the surface area of a person, in other words, how much skin and surface area is on the body of a person, because that allows for more sweat, obviously. The heavier you are, the bigger you are, the more you sweat. And then the intensity of the session that you're doing. Because that all will, the higher the intensity, the bigger, the heavier the person, the hotter it is, the more fluid you lose. You can't measure hydration based on energy. Hydration needs to be separate. And fluid intake is really dependent on fluid loss. So generally, what we measure is we want to try and replenish 80% of the amount of fluid loss when it comes to hydration. So what does that mean? So first of all, how do you know how much fluid you lose in a session? Well, you can weigh yourself before the session and weigh yourself naked before the session, and then weigh yourself naked afterwards, because when you come back sweating, that is weight. And if you say, let's say you weigh 60 kilos and you come back and you weigh 58 kilograms, you've lost 2 kilograms. That's 2 liters of fluid. 2 liters of fluid is a lot. Let's say you went for 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Well, let's say you went for 2.5 hours. It's about 660 or so, a little bit more milliliters per an hour. Okay, so call it 330 milliliters every half an hour. But it's not so clear cut. You started off the session and it was cool, and as you went through the session, it got hotter. So your fluid requirements became more as your session went longer. Because in the beginning, your heart rate was lower, you were sweating less. So maybe in the first hour, you needed 400 milliliters. In the second hour, maybe you needed 600. And in the last one, you needed like 800. and that could be the case. So the more you're sweating, obviously, the more you're going to take off. You cannot match exactly what you've lost, but you can try and at least replenish a high percentage of it. The other issue we've got is that when it comes to hydration, if we lose a large amount of fluid, you can't rely on water to take that fluid in. It's like a drain. You throw water in, and the water just fills and fills and fills a block drain. It fills it up, and then the drain does this. So a certain amount gets absorbed every so often. How do you maximize the absorption of the water or the fluid? You throw drain cleaner in. What's that drain cleaner? First thing you throw in is salt. Great. Increasing. What else is a perfect drain cleaner? Salt plus carbohydrate, salt and glucose. The two together, okay, maximize fluid absorption and really put it through. So what does that mean? When you are running and taking on fluid, make sure you're getting salt and carbohydrates with that fluid. You need a little bit of carbs. You need a fair amount of salt, depending on the temperature, and that will maximize the fluid absorption. Don't drink water on its own. It's not advisable. You're limiting your fluid absorption. You want to take it with something. Okay. All right, so I've spoken about this already. Okay, so then a lot of people ask me, okay, but how much salt should I take? And that really depends on the unique requirements of an individual. So every day, based on the kind of exercise you're doing, you're going to sweat very differently. And some people will sweat more than others, some people less. Hydration requirements need to match the unique needs of an athlete. They exercise in duration, intensity, and climate based. That's really what they are. And there's a big sodium issue, because I see people that go with these high sodium hydration solutions every single day, and they don't realize that that's not good. You can't just go and, I'm going to just have lots and lots of salt and drink water with it every single day, because that is going to cause a huge problem. What happens when you put sodium into your body with fluid? Okay. You increase your blood pressure. What happens when you raise blood pressure? You put a stress on the heart. What happens when you put a stress on the heart? Well, you can lead to cardiovascular risk. It can lead to cardiovascular risk. And that's the last thing you want to do. That's why a lot of organizations, from a health perspective, health organizations globally are trying to give cutoffs to the sodium ceiling for the average population on a daily basis. And by the way, they say 2,300 milligrams is the cutoff. So if you go and take 1,000 milligram sodium solution every single day, I can promise you, you are way past the ceiling. And you might not have sweated a lot that day. So what I look at when it comes to sodium is simple. I look at it in three ways. You've got a green, an orange, and a red. Green means go. Low sodium intake. Maybe anywhere up to 300 milligrams of sodium in an electrolyte solution, or a little bit, maybe 350, 400 milligrams. is sort of on the lower end. And that would suffice for most exercise sessions, probably up to an hour and a half, unless it's a very intense session. But then I get moderate, which I'd say maybe is between 350 to 400 up to maybe 750 milligrams of sodium. And that's for longer, sort of maybe hotter or higher duration intensity sessions. And then we get high sodium intake. That's the red one. That's very high. And that high sodium intake is like 750 to 1,000, even up to 1,500 milligrams. And that is really for much longer, much higher intensity or much hotter exercise sessions where you really are sweating a lot. Then you can go with that high sodium intake on an hourly basis. But don't just take a high sodium intake every single day, because there is a health concern and you need to know about this. I get very frustrated. I was watching a podcast the other day. There was a doctor speaking. Actually, he's also he was a guest on a sports nutrition webinar. And he was actually saying that there was a big problem. Everybody was told, hydrate, 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 because you need to hydrate because it's good for your skin and it's good for weight loss and it's good for everything. And so people overdrank water. So when they overdrank water, they created a brand new industry. And that industry is the salt industry, the electrolyte industry. Over drinking water created the electrolyte industry, because now you take electrolytes and, like I said, it's like a drain cleaner. It pulls that water through. Do we really need that much water? We are not the average population in the world. We are what I call the 0.1%ers of the world, maybe even less than that. We're the people that get up at the early hours every single morning to really punish ourselves, hopefully for health, for a better quality life, and to put less burden onto the healthcare systems, because I like to look at it that way, but also to get a medal at the finish line. Okay. And so we're very different. We've got much different sweat rates compared to an average individual. So we've just got to, like I said, match those unique sweat rates to the kind of hydration solution that you are looking at taking. Okay. I'll answer some of those questions at the end. So I broke down this little table to give you an idea. And by the way, this presentation will be made available. We will email a PDF or a download link to get this PDF. So if I look at hydration types, you get the 0-calorie hydration. They're usually very high in sodium. Some are moderate. You get low-calorie mineral spectrum carb mix. So there we get like what we call, it's not 0-calorie, it's lower calorie. Sodium on its own increases fluid pull through, but like I said before, sodium and glucose, carbs, maximizes fluid pull through because it engages what we call a co-transporter mechanism, where it does SGLT1, sodium glucose transporter 1, and GLUT2, glucose transporter 2. And those two, so that GLUT2, it pulls a lot of fluid molecules, water molecules into the blood. It's amazing how the two work together. And that's why you'll find that when it comes to proper hydration, the people that really know what they're doing properly are the ones that take a high sodium mix with a carbohydrate mix, with a little bit of carbs. And we launched, for example, recently, it's called Hydrate 1000. It is definitely not calorie free. Intentionally, we put in 6 grams of carbohydrates in there to activate GLUT2 and SGLT1 to make sure that we maximize fluid absorption. That is how medical rehydration works. Carbs with sodium. Sodium on its own is not good enough. It's like starting an engine and the spark plugs are not all firing. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Sodium and glucose. So if you are a heavy sweater or you're going to sweat a lot, it's a long run, you need to make sure that you have glucose with the sodium. Don't take the sodium on its own, glucose and sodium. If you are sort of light to moderate sweater, then you can go with the sort of calorie-free, sort of moderate to low to moderate sodium intake. And that's why we've got our Hydrate, which is actually only 333 milligrams of sodium or 337 milligrams of sodium. But that's more of a daily electrolyte and for moderate and low, sort of low to moderate sweaters. But once you're going big guns and getting to that area where you're using a lot more fluid, you want to go with a system that really, really pulls the fluid through properly. And so that's why I've put this table up for you, just to give you an idea. So 0 to 60 minutes, low to medium sodium, 60 to 120 medium to maybe slightly higher sodium, 2 to 4 hours, you'll see high sodium and carb, and then high sodium and carbohydrate. And that's how I've broken that down. Okay. I'll answer that question. So just to give you an idea, I've just put the 3 products here. So hydrate, you'll see daily electrolyte, low, moderate sweat rate, mineral. You can use it for mineral loading, intra-exercise, post-exercise. And then the sodium, the 32G hydrate 1000, moderate to high sweat rate, can also be used intra-exercise, post-exercise rehydration, and then mineral loading. Cramper salt is also an electrolyte gel. So for people that don't want to take a powder sachet and mix it in a cup or put it in a bath, whatever, that's a carry mechanism. And there you've got 200 milligrams of sodium that you can run with. So if you added that to what else you're taking on the route, and you took one of those every 30 minutes or every 45 minutes, you'll be adding salt. And that has got glucose and sodium in. And so what do the two do? They maximize fluid absorption. So that, if you take the Cramper salt gel, I'm very happy for you to drink water with it, because the water with that gel will provide that pull through. So that's a case where you don't have to mix it. Okay, unless you want to dry powder or put an effervescent, it's a different story, but that's why we designed the Cramper salt. It's an easy to carry electrolyte gel. And that's only for intra-exercise hydration, not mineral loading, not post-exercise. That's intra-exercise, and it's for runners specifically. We designed it for runners. And it's got an anti-cramp mechanism. But the anti-cramp is also really, you want to prevent it. You don't want to have to try and cure it, that's for sure. Okay, so when it comes to a sports nutrition strategy, you never arrive at a race without a planned nutrition strategy. You need to be thinking about these things now, practicing them every single opportunity you get. Start low, build high. Remember, digestive comfort to energy balance. Take notice of what you're consuming in the form of solids and liquids under various conditions. Take note of your energy levels before, during, at the end of your session. If you finish your session strong with a proper feeding strategy, and afterwards session, if you do not feel flat, you don't need to go lie down, you don't feel tired, you can even delay the onset of your recovery meal. I promise you, you've nailed your nutrition. You've nailed it. That's how you know you've nailed your nutrition. If you finish a session, you think, I could have run another 10 kilometers. Man, I ran 40, but I could have done my long run today. That is a brilliant way to finish. And if you feel properly, you can get that feeling. Okay. Don't make changes once you have satisfied and you've tested it out, long training session, mimicking your race conditions, long runs, etc. Don't then decide and double doubt yourself when people tell you, do this or do that or do that. You've practiced this. This has worked for you. You've optimized this over many weeks and months. Stick to it, take it to race day, and make sure that you utilize it on race day. Don't get sucked into what some people do, which is like they practice all the time, and then all of a sudden, man, they take something different on race day, and it completely messes up the event. Don't lose confidence. When you've practiced it and you've trained it, you can go to the race with confidence that you know exactly what you're doing because you've tried and tested it for yourself. Okay. Just so you know, okay, so let's talk about what's going to be on Comrades route. On Comrades route, we've got a snap gel zone at 30 kilometers where we've got thousands and thousands of gels. Okay. We've got another gel zone at 45 kilometers, snap gels again, and then another zone again at 55 kilometers. A slight difference at 55. We don't just have energy gels, we're putting Cramper salt as well. So we've got hydration gels because at that stage, the temperature is definitely heated up, and that's where people really need to start worrying about, if they're taking in enough salt or they're getting the onset of cramps, etc. So that's really an aid. And then at the 65K mark, we're going to have, again, gels and Cramper salt. And then the last zone at the 80 kilometers, actually caffeine. That's a pick-me-up to the finish because it's okay to take caffeine at that stage. Hopefully at that stage at 80Ks, if you take a caffeine shot, you'll cross the finish line before it wears off. But if you're worried, grab 2 at the station and then maybe you definitely will be safe. These are rough estimates of the Comrades fueling zones. We're doing a recon on the course with the Comrades Marathon Association, or the CMA, in a couple of weeks. And once they give us the exact distances, because it might be at the 44, or the 46, or the 45.5, or whatever. Once they give us the exact distances of those markers, they're roughly here. They'll be definitely within a K or so of it. then we will definitely be able to do that for you. So we will make sure that signage is given to all the Comrades Marathon runners. We will be at Expo. We will tell you exactly where they are, but we'll be sending out a lot of information explaining exactly where those tables will be. Okay, let's get into some Q&A. Yeah. I'm going to start just with some of the questions that were in the chat, and then I'll move on to the questions that were sent to me. What are gut-friendly and easy carry options? You can't take gels continuously for 56.89. By the way, I love the 30 Rest Pro Super Carb Energy Gel. So look, I mean, you've got to decide. What I say to people when it comes to sports nutrition is, are you a liquid feeder, or are you a solid feeder, or are you a combination feeder? Some people like gels, some people like drinks, some people like in-between chews, some people hate gels. Some people like liquid gels, some people like thick gels and don't like liquid. Everybody's different. But you've got to find one or two products that work for you, and those you can use together. If you like using the Race Pro gel, I generally mix flavors, and I can use a Race Pro gel for a 10-hour race. To be honest, I love it. It works well for me. I use that with caffeine and an electrolyte solution, and that works extremely well. I actually want to get something. If you just give me a sec, I'm just going to quickly grab something here. Because I've got this race belt, which I want to show you, which I actually use for long distance training, and it works so amazingly for me. Sorry about that. I actually, it's, I'm not affiliated with this brand, by the way, but I've given this advice to athletes because many years ago I was introduced to this Forza race belt. It is an absolutely amazing belt. I mean, it is. I'll actually send a link out to the details of the site. It's got a it's first of all, it weighs nothing. It goes around the hips, which I like, and because it goes around the hips, you don't actually feel it. It is so comfortable. I fitted in this thing. I think it was 42 snap gels in this belt. That's how much gels I fitted in here. I went on a half marathon with a friend of mine, and I took in a GoPro with a stick. I took a drone. I've got a small drone. I took in 2 Race Pro gels with me, and I took a cell phone, and they all fitted in this belt. And it was actually so comfortable, you don't even feel it because it sits on the hip. So, I mean, that's one very, very easy way of carrying some product. If you're very worried about, like, I'm not going to see my seconds en route, or very worried about it, there are people that like to run with bladders. I'm not usually a fan of bladders because you're adding extra weight onto the body, and unless you've trained with that weight, that extra force over a distance is definitely going to put a little bit more damage onto the body, and it does add on. A lot of people say, "Oh, but I'm going to drink it," and I'm like, "Well, when it's finished, you're going to refill it, maybe. I don't know." But it just does add some mass, and so unless you've trained with it, then it's not worth doing. But if you've trained with it, that's a different story. Okay, so what causes a side stitch? A side stitch is usually caused by, actually, I find when people overconsume or they take on a little bit too much fluid, it actually sits and it actually puts a little bit of pressure on the side. It's not dehydration that, it's probably washing machine effect, overhydration, fluid not being pulled through. Add salt and carbs, stop drinking, let it be absorbed. It might settle. The way to try and reduce the stitch is the side that the stitch is. Every time you run, make sure that if it's on your right side, as your right foot hits the ground, release that air. Exhale, rapidly exhale that air every time it hits the ground. And after a few steps, it hopefully will start to ease up a little bit. I have found that for some people it takes a bit longer than a few steps, but it is one of the ways of actually dealing with it. It's not a pleasant feeling. It's happened to me once in my life, actually, and it wasn't pleasant. um, how often do you drink Hydrate 1000 in Comrades? It really depends on your loss. I mean, your fluid loss. When I'm racing in very hot conditions, I definitely aim for 1,000 milligrams an hour, which would be one of those an hour. But if it's cooler, you could take a half a sachet an hour. It doesn't have to be a full sachet. So it really depends on the amount of fluid you're losing and how much sweat. I would say early on, probably less. And as it gets up through the hotter periods of the day, you'd probably need to take on more. Cramp assault. Somebody said, I love the cramp assault and snap gel combo. So you don't need to mix drinks en route. Correct. You don't need to mix drinks en route. You can take those. You just need to make sure that you've got enough to be able to achieve your hourly sodium and your hourly energy intake to be able to make sure it's comfortable. Will there be a restriction to how many gels you can take at a station? Look, to be honest, in the beginning, the elite athletes we try and restrict because we want to look after the backpacks. So, but what we find is a lot of the athletes. Okay, let me say a lot of the athletes, especially the fast athletes, they've all got their product with them. A lot of them don't really take en route unless it's an emergency and a backup. So you'll find that the first third of the field doesn't really take much from aid stations. The second third, they start to take. But let me give you a little bit of confidence. First of all, we've catered now for 3 years at Comrades. We have always had plenty of products to take home. So you won't be limited. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to let somebody go and take 10 gels at a station or 5 gels at a station, knowing that the next station's like 15 Ks away and the next one's 15 Ks away. But there will be plenty of gels available for the field. And we've never actually run out of stock of products, ever. Would I recommend magnesium? Magnesium is good for before sleep. It calms the nervous system, gives you a better night's sleep. During exercise, all electrolyte solutions have got a little bit of magnesium in, including ours, but that's not going to be the difference. Magnesium, for any athlete, is an amazing mineral, and you should take one. You should take a magnesium, whatever the dosage is, depending on what you're taking. I take magnesium every night before I go to sleep. It definitely helps with a better night's sleep, but it also does help keep your magnesium levels up. And we know that, red cell magnesium is quite important for any athlete. So I do advocate it, but during exercise, it's not a necessity. Just take it at night before you go to sleep. Should we take cramp assault from the first hour if we don't have another electrolyte drink? Yes. I would say take it about 45 minutes in. Absolutely. I would start taking sodium early on. But what I like to do before events and what I do advocate for athletes is to mineral load. So leading 3 days into the event, I take like 3 bottles of Hydrate a day, morning, afternoon, morning, lunchtime, and then afternoon. I don't like to take before sleep. I need to sleep enough, but I never have water on its own. I want to maximize my sodium levels leading into the event, and I do that for 3 days. I top up my sodium stores because that can really help with hydration status on the day. So mineral load before that event. You can also remember mineral load the morning of the event. You can take on some salt as well. So I don't like to take a lot of fluid in before the start of a race, but I make a concentrate in a glass and then drink it to get those mineral levels up. And that does help. That allows you to sort of delay the intake of the sodium in the first hour. Okay. For an average person planning to run a 10, 11-hour Comrades, I would need to understand the weight, the body fat, the height of that person, because that will give me an idea of how much they would, and also what, like what their sweat rate is, etc. Somebody said they love the Forza belt. By the way, these guys at Forza, the South African company, they're really good guys. And I will put a link. I'll put a link up. It is an amazing belt. Amazing. I've actually got 2. Okay, so I just want to talk about something that I've been working on for many, many, many months, which I hope to launch it will be launched before Comrades for sure. I've been working on an AR technology which will allow you to put all your physiological measurements into an app. It will give me, you can put your heart, your weight, your heart rate data, whatever you want to stick in there, and it will help you it will help you structure a nutrition plan for you for a particular event. I've also created an AI system where it will turn out a hydration strategy for you for your particular event. And hopefully that will be really, really good because that will be based on your unique needs. It's been a really sort of big project that I've been embarked on for a long time. I did introduce AI onto our website already 2 years ago. I'm a huge fan of utilizing AI for as a tool because I'm not always available. And so I thought whatever I can share that's in my head with anybody and help guide them, like on a one-to-one basis, a challenge response AI is absolutely the best way to go. So we're working with a company that specializes in this. It's an international company. They specialize in education, actually, in AI for education. And we felt that this was a really, really good fit. So when that launches, you guys will be my test bed. I promise you. I want to hear all the complaints, all the feedback, and we will keep tweaking it. Into that AI, I'm going to be working in pre-training meals, post-exercise recovery meals, based on what the requirements of an individual are, and then eventually even daily nutrition plans, and it's just going to keep expanding, and I hope to turn it into a beautiful app as well. So I've been working on it for a very long time, and the idea is to launch it before Comrades this year. I was thinking maybe April, May, but we've just got to see, how that development comes along. But I will keep you posted. Okay, let's just get into some of the questions. I'm going to throw them up on the screen if you give me a second. I'm just going to go and throw this up here. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to share this quickly. Okay, there we go. So, questions that I got asked: how much water should you have with gels? It's a very good question. Remember when you take on a gel, remember what I said, some gels are very concentrated, some gels are fluid gels, some gels are isotonic gels. You want to try and get at least to that isotonic environment. You might not get exactly there, but if you're taking a thick gel, a very concentrated gel, you probably need about 300 milliliters, 280 to 300 mils of water with that gel to maximize the absorption. The reason why some people get gastrointestinal discomfort is because they're not taking enough water in. So you get a hypertonic solution that sits in the gut, which is the gel. It sits there, and the microbiome is having its wonderful time with that gel, and then starting to ferment, and suddenly gas cramps. So at that stage, the body's not happy, and it reverse pulls water back into the system, and it tries to break this down. That's why you need to drink water with a gel. With the 32 GR snap gels, there's a little bit of water in them, not enough. So you do need to probably take on, I'd say, about 180 mils of water, or 150. So at least a water sachet that you would get en route, I would take a water sachet with it. So with a race pro gel, though, there is a lot of water in a race pro gel. You would need a lot less water, if you need water at all. That gel is very, very much a fluid gel. Okay. Someone said a correct plan to use with Comrades for 70 male weighing. That's not enough information to do a nutrition plan. But based on what I've told you now, I think it's important for you to go and experiment and to try and get to that. Remember what I said, grams of carbs per hour, 60 to 90. I don't think you need more than 90 for Comrades. I must be honest. I don't really think you need more than that. I think it's just going to cause gastrointestinal risk. I think that you should aim for between 60 and 90. And that would be perfect. If you can get to 90 and you're very comfortable, I don't think you have to build more. If you only make it to 65 or 66 or whatever, and that you're happy with, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to stress. Okay. Oh, sorry. Somebody asked about a question at 7:24. Oh, okay. I think this is the question. How do I keep myself below zone 4 during training and races without being too slow? I guess it's a good question, but the problem is first of all, Comrades is it's not a fast race. I mean, even an elite athlete doesn't run at marathon pace. It's an ultra. So you're not going to run it at a fast pace. But if you cannot run at a decent pace in zone 3, it means that you just haven't developed your endurance engine to that extent. Your cardiorespiratory fitness is not at the level that it should be, and you need to look at periodizing your training properly, and you need to improve your endurance capacity. So the way to do that, really, 80% of the time, very, very slow run. So I'm just going to use this as an example. I work with a lot of athletes that even they're around 230, 240 marathon runners. And when they go and do a long run, they sometimes run that run at 5 minutes to 5:20 a kilometer. So you think about that. They're running marathons around 2.5 hours, but they're running 5-minute K slow long runs. A lot of people don't know how to run slowly because they never run slowly. And if you want to adapt your endurance engine, you've got to really learn that slow running is going to make you a faster runner because it's going to really improve your endurance capacity. And when you do the quality sets, you'll be able to really, really give it your all. And so that's polarized training. And that's really what you need to focus on. Because people train in groups, I think that what happens is that they get pushed out of their comfort zones. They get pushed out of their training zones. Friends want to run together. The one friend runs a sub 3-hour marathon. The other friend can only run a 3:30 or 4-hour marathon. Yet they run together. The guy running the 3-hour marathon run is running slowly, and the guy with him is like, man, okay, this is hard for me, but manageable. And this guy is breathing and having a conversation. The other guy can barely talk. Different strokes for different folks. You've got to train according to your ability. And if you want to improve, don't rely on running with somebody that's better than you. Rely on running with somebody that's really at the same level and that you both are able to manage. Okay. 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour. 60 is the minimum. 60 grams is the minimum. If you can at least hit that, that's great. And if you want to build on that, you can. Look, somebody said that it makes sense to carry gels for safety's sake and not rely what's en route. I always believe in carrying my own fuel and using tables as backups. I just do because something's going to go wrong. You know, we sponsored an Ironman event overseas many years ago. I trained 32GR were the sponsors of that Ironman event. I actually entered that event and I decided I'm going to race it. I trained on Race Pro. I trained and trained and trained on Race Pro because that's what I wanted to utilize. That's where I can take in, with Race Pro gels, I can go up to 120 grams of carbs an hour easily. It's the easiest on my gut, and I've got a very sensitive gut. And what I did was I went to the race. I took all my product with me. And even though 32GR was the sponsor of the race, they never had one Race Pro anything en route. They had Endure, they had Choose, they had Hydrate. There was no Race Pro. And while I was racing around the course, somebody said to me, who knows me, what, you're not even using your own product en route. And then I can't stop and talk. I'm racing. I actually took a podium that race. I got a slot to Worlds that was actually quite awesome because it was a while. And after the race, he came to talk to me. He was so disappointed because he knew me and he knows that like I'm obviously brand specific, and he couldn't understand why I didn't use my own product en route. And I had to explain to him because, friend, I trained with a certain product, I brought it to the course and I used it. And that's the thing. I always advocate, take your product to course. If I had run out of product, something had fallen off my bike, because it was an Ironman, if something had fallen off my bike or I'd lost my nutrition or whatever, I could have a backup plan. I could have had the tables as a backup plan. But I don't like to rely on tables. I like to use them as optionals and not as givens. Because if something goes wrong, what do athletes do? They'll never blame themselves. They're going to blame the table. I didn't find you en route, or I didn't see you, or I got there and you didn't have the right flavor for me, it's always going to be a problem. So, and when it comes to cups, like recently there was a marathon that I got moaned at. Well, it wasn't, we didn't sponsor the event, but I got moaned at by athletes saying, what do I do? They've got cups en route, because cups, you don't know how much they're putting in there. You don't know how much they're mixing. You don't know if it's too diluted. You don't know if it's too concentrated. You don't know if there's enough water. So that can also be a danger. So you've got to be very, very careful there. Okay. I've used 32 proteins and find them I'm not using them effectively. For example, I consumed 2 Race Pro gels for Comrades and consumed 400 miles. Okay, so let me tell you, I've got a friend. Actually, a lot of you might know him, Wendy Goldwana. Wendy's an amazing guy. He's a good friend of mine. We actually used to run together every Wednesday. Now it's like every second Wednesday when we're not traveling. And Wendy is amazing. Like he's like a fine wine. He ages so well and he gets faster. But I think it was 48. He ran a sub 6 hour Comrades, 550, 557 actually. It was an impressive run. I watched him do that run. I was feeding them on course and I actually saw how amazing it was. After that run, I said to him, because he used the Race Pro Gel, I said to him, I want to know exactly how you feel. We had spoken about it, but I wanted to understand what he did in real time. And in 6 hours, call it 6 hours, 6 hours, okay, he had 7 Race Pro Gels. 7 Race Pro Gels in 6 hours. That is fueling. And he had hydrate. He had hydrate every chance he got, and I think he even had caffeine. But that is fueling. That is proper fuel. I mean, that's taking on 75 grams of carb. No, sorry, that Comrades, he took on 84 grams of carbohydrates per hour. 84 grams per hour is what he took. And so that's how you feel. You measure hourly and you stick to it. 2 Race Pro Gels per Comrades is like a very fine line of underfueling. Very fine line. It's too little. Okay, for a diabetic that manages, I don't know if it's type 1 or type 2. So, look, diabetics are very different and very unique because, everybody's got different. Endure is a very good stabilizer. It's a blood sugar stabilizer. We find it works very well for diabetics because it doesn't break down quick enough to cause it doesn't break down quick enough to cause any kind of glucose elevation. It sort of mildly increases glucose elevation over time. However, if that's not a sufficient amount of glucose required because you might go hypoglycemic, you've probably got to shorten your feeding frequencies and you've got to have more carb more often. So more frequent feeding. The way to do that is to really just obviously monitor your blood sugar based on your feeding frequency, the timing of your intake of carbs, and the kind of carbohydrates that you're utilizing. It isn't easy for people with blood sugar issues, but there definitely are solutions. But I would probably stick with Endure at first to see how you feel. I would look at the chews and the Endure powder if that's an option. And then, if that doesn't work, you go for something that's a little bit quicker releasing. Race Pro Gel, I think, would also be good because there's a little bit of protein in there. And I believe protein intake in ultra endurance or long distance is very, very important because I didn't speak about that, but that's a third fuel tank. But I think it's very vital to try and keep you stable, satiate you, and also allow you to maybe stabilize that blood sugar response a little bit. It also prevents a process called, with gluconeogenesis, is a process where your own muscle protein is broken down, or proteins are broken down and utilized as a fuel substrate. And if you want to prevent that those symptoms from happening, which can lead to muscle fatigue, ingest protein. So I do believe protein ingestion is desired during Comrades. How to avoid cramps, proper training, proper conditioning. If you go under conditioned, you can definitely risk muscle overusing your muscles, and that can lead to cramping. There's no sure cure, and there's no sure reason. Dehydration can also lead to cramps. There can be a lot of reasons. So for dehydration, prevention is better than cure. Salt, carbs, and water. That's going to help. Why do we hit the wall? Your glycogen tank just got empty. Your glycogen tank got empty because you didn't take in enough carbohydrates. And when your glycogen tank empty, your brain says, I've had enough. It shuts down your legs. And that's where you sit on the side of the road deciding whether you're going to take the bus back to the Comrades finish line or you're going to actually get up and go. So when you hit the wall, the reason the brain shuts down the muscles is because it wants you to slow down your effort, allow oxygen into the system. And what did I tell you oxygen does when it gets back into the system? It burns fat. And that's why you get a second wind. Oh, wow. Okay, my body's burning fat now. I can go again. I've got another fuel source. But the problem with fat burn is, like I said, slows you down. So you've got to go slowly. You can't get the heart rate up. And that could be walking or it could be running and jogging and walking for some people. Don't underfuel. You don't want to hit the wall. Okay. Is it wise for me to run long distance every weekend and during the week? Look, as you're getting closer to Comrades, I can tell you, most coaches, including me, I'm a fan of midweek long runs, like a Wednesday midweek long run, and then a Saturday or maybe a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Sunday, or a Thursday and a Sunday. But definitely 2 long runs during the week are great. I would say like it doesn't have to. A long run in midweek could be even 2 hours. It doesn't have to be like 3-4 hours, but to add volume, it could be 2 hours in the week, in midweek, 2.5 hours, and then on the weekend, obviously the longer runs. But I think that that's a great way to build up volume without risking stress. Just remember, fuel, because you don't want to land up fatigued, and you need to fuel those efforts. So somebody said they weigh 95. Does it mean they have to consume 95 grams? No, we don't look at grams per kilogram of body weight anymore, because it really depends on what your gut can handle. You might weigh 95 and you might take on 95 grams, but your gut will say, I don't speak the language of 95 grams. I speak 60, 70. And then you need to train yourself, but you definitely don't need to go to that extent. I mean, imagine somebody weighing 130 and and they need to take 130 grams of carbs. It's not going to work. There's no ways. Hunger on race day, fuel properly, take on a little bit of protein. Carbohydrates for now, I've spoken about. Fueling is definitely, when should you start fueling? That's actually a good question. When should you start fueling for Comrades? This is the answer. 10, 15 minutes before the start, take on a gel, or take on half a gel, or a third of a Race Pro, whatever it is, or a Snap Gel. Take it on. Banana, whatever. Take it on, because when the race starts, what is the first thing? You're not going to start fumbling and fueling. You'll trip. You'll fall on somebody. The field is really crowded. It's dark. You don't want to trip in a pothole or whatever. Hopefully, all these things are smoothed up, but you just don't want to take a chance. You don't want to fall. You want the field to spread out a bit. You want to get also into a period of equilibrium. You want to get into a comfort zone. And once you're in that comfort zone, you can start fueling. Where is that comfort zone? It's usually around 20 to 30 minutes in. Don't leave it longer than that. If you can start at 20 minutes, start. If 20 minutes is still too early for you, then start at 30 minutes. But don't go longer than that. So you start before, and that will see you for the first 20, 30 minutes. And then you can start fueling again. That's when to start fueling for the race. What should you do as a first-time Comrades runner? Pray. No, I'm joking. Listen, first-time Comrades runner, all I can say is this, is enjoy the process, enjoy the training, and don't get stressed by what anybody's telling you to fuel, how they're telling you to train. You just listen to the experts that are out there and, do what works for you. That's what you need to do. And, you probably enjoy it. An up run is actually easy on the legs. We know that. A down run's a lot hard on the legs. But just enjoy the process. And it's nice to be a first-time Comrades runner, because then if you do a back-to-back, you'll probably swear that you're not going to ever come back to Comrades, but I guarantee you'll be back for the centenary. That's a nice one. Someone says, yeah, 1 foot in front of the other. I love that. True. Focus on the finish line. Just focus on the finish line. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. And whatever you do, don't stop. Walk, crawl, run, but get there. That's a nice, that was really nice. Okay. How can I avoid a running tummy during the run? Yeah, runner's trots. Such a difficult one. I deal a lot with gut issues. I come from a family with a history of gut issues, and I deal with so many people that suffer from gut issues. And generally, it's internalizing stress, in actual fact, that causes it. Look, first of all, before the event, avoid any foods that would trigger gastrointestinal issues. So if you're lactose intolerant, avoid lactose. If you're fructose intolerant, avoid fructose. Reduce your fiber intake as well. Fiber can really make the gut work, so you definitely don't want to do that. If you suffer from gut issues, make sure that you take a probiotic every single day, a really good probiotic that you need to take. Take things like glutamine that lower acidity in the bowel and also help with gut health. Take zinc, it's very good for gut health. So there are supplements you can take to help with gut health. Eat prebiotics, eat fermented foods, anything to help heal the gut. Avoid things that are going to screw the gut up. Things like alcohol, things like very heavy spices, etc., processed oils, fats, that kind of stuff. These things should all be avoided. Don't go eat pizza the night before the race. It's not a good idea. Don't go eat red meat the night before a race. It's also not a good idea. Eat like white rice, white bread, white pasta, lean proteins, white fish, chicken breast, egg white. These are really lean proteins, tuna. Things that are really easy on the digestive system, easily processed, etc. If you lead up to that event and you've done all the right things, and you're still getting a running stomach, maybe you need to, first of all, maybe if it's really, really serious, like in some cases, we send people to a gastroenterologist and we start to see what is the issue. Do they have IBS? Are they internalizing stress? Do they have proctitis? Do they have Crohn's disease? Do they have celiac? What is going on in the gut? And these are things that need to be managed. But for some people, stomach issues are part and parcel of life, and very often I find that it's really stress can trigger stomach issues. If there's a way you can calm down and relax before the event, I think that would really, really help. Okay. Don't take tablets that block the digestive system. No. Imodium is not to be utilized because it doesn't just block your stomach. It blocks absorption and it will cause energy havoc. Don't do it. And don't take NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. It's the last thing you want to do because I've seen people die from taking it. Kidney failure. People say, I take it all the time. So was somebody I knew, said I took it all the time. For 10 years, this guy took Advil. Always. Every couple of hours into race, take some Advil. And then one day the bullet exited the chamber. Russian roulette. Boom. Bang. Double kidney failure, age 40, passed away. Do not take the risk and don't think that you're invincible because it can happen to you. I'm very harsh when I speak about that because I've seen havoc in people's lives when it comes to taking medication during the event. It's not advisable. Okay. Is carb loading really necessary on the days leading up to the race? No, it's not necessary. People don't understand the science of carb loading. Carb loading is really what elite athletes do is they deplete their glycogen stores completely. They hit the wall properly, take those glycogen stores, and then they time the intake and the volume of the carbohydrates and they build it really up. What does it do? Oh, it gives them an extra what? Maybe 200 calories of glycogen. I don't know, not much more, maybe 300 calories. But if you're burning off 600, 700, 800 calories an hour, is it going to make a difference for an 8 or a 10-hour or 11-hour runner? It's not going to make any difference whatsoever. That amount of calories is not going to make a difference. For an elite athlete that's coming down to the wire, and it is a percentages game, it's a proper race, there could be a slight percentage benefit to having a little bit more glycogen, but not for the average runner. I think people overdo carb loading. They don't understand the science of depleting and then increasing. My advice is this. You want to increase carbohydrate intake leading to the event. You lower the fat, you increase the carbs, and that's how we do it. The day before the event, you can have a little bit more carbohydrates at lunch. You can go and increase the carbs quite nicely at lunchtime and drop the fat down. At dinner, don't overeat. You can have a little bit of carbs at dinner, a little small meal, go to sleep. Most important meal is the pre-race meal. We are going to do specific race sessions. We're going to get to specific race sessions leading into Comrades, and how to prep. But the thing is that you don't want to overload yourself because you risk causing stomach issues. You also risk if impacting your sleep the night before the race. If you overload it, and you can't sleep the night before the race, you're going to have a miserable race. Sleep equals performance. It's more important than having a little bit extra food in your tummy. So don't do that. If you overload your gut, you're not going to sleep well that night. Okay, so I just think it's not worth it. If you've underfueled during the race, is a way of bouncing back. Well, first of all, prevention is always better than cure with anything in life. Is there a way of bouncing back? Yes. You've got to slow down your pace and you've got to start taking on carbohydrates regularly. And hopefully that will kickstart your motor again. But it might take 20, 30 minutes, sometimes even in cases a little bit longer. Yeah, so I spoke about glucose and fructose metabolic pathway. Somebody asked me about it. I've spoken about that. So hopefully I answered those questions. Look, peanut butter to me is not a food. Potatoes, like I said, is. Peanut butter is fat. I don't think you need fat. If anything, you need carbs, a little bit of protein maybe, but not fat, and then some salt. Um, so, I mean, if you crave it, if you're really craving it, maybe, people say to me, but peanut butter is protein. It's fat. It's a tiny bit of protein, but it's mainly fat. Um, I find that like people that eat biltong, they go for it maybe because it's salty and it actually helps them feel better from a salt perspective more than anything else. Okay, here's some good questions. How to make use of salt tablets? I've spoken about salt tablets. Look, you've got to know how many milligrams of sodium you're taking per an hour. Generally, a salt tablet's about 200 milligrams. So if you want 600 milligrams per an hour, you need to maybe take a salt tablet every 30 minutes because over and above that with the gels, you'll probably hit your 600. But that's just an example. You need to break it down. Put it in a spreadsheet, how much you're going to take, and you can work it out. You need to carry a running vest filled with water if you sweat a lot. Look, there's plenty of water tables en route. There are plenty. So I don't think you do. Uh, Look, there are ways of carrying stuff with you. 60 to 80 grams of carbs per hour, like I said, is like, I haven't got one with me now, but we've got like these 32 GR soft flasks. I can fit 3 Race Pro gels in a soft flask. I carry 2 on me. That's 6 Race Pro gels just in a soft flask. That's a lot. I can fit maybe 4 soft flasks in a belt like this. But if I just took 2, one in the front, one at the back, that sees me for uh, call it at 6 times 75. Because if you're going at 60 grams, I'm saying. So it's a minimum of 6 hours. But at 6 times 75, divide that by 60, 7.5 hours of fuel with 2 soft flasks. I mean, that's really good gain. Not to mention, you might jump in some potatoes and stuff in between, so that could even extend it a little bit longer. What is the difference between dehydration, loss of sodium, salt, and cramping? When do you know in cramping because you're dehydrated versus underfueled? Underfueled, it doesn't cause cramp. Underfueled causes hitting the wall. That's not cramp. That's like, there's a big difference. Your head's going to be a bit fuzzy. Your legs are going to feel numb. You're not going to be cramping. Cramping, you feel, man. It's painful. Your legs start to really twitch and pull, and they hurt. So that generally it's not sodium loss. It's the opposite. It's lack of fluid and sodium balance. So you need to make sure that you're getting both in to the right amounts. Yeah, look, I know some people who have got seconds en route and they rely on them, and they carry stuff in between, and they've got seconds. As long as you don't miss your seconds, you're great. But that's where you should have a backup in case you do miss a second. But I think it's actually quite important to have some seconds en route if you've got very specific requirements. There are people that actually do seconding tables en route. There's a company that you can put your fuel at, and then 32GR, the running club, offers tables for people. They charge for it though, but you get product. They charge a fee, but the product's free, and they've got specific tables with additional product. That's not related to what's on Comrades route, but that's related to what they offer. And they put other products on route as well, over and above what we put on the Comrades route. If you're interested, you can drop a mail to, I left the email address there. You can send an email to coach@32gr.com, and I can forward your email to the chairman of the 32GR Running Club, and he can tell you what they're doing for Comrades route. But they put up about four tables as well, I think. Yeah, so I mean, as you mentioned, yeah, sports nutrition can become quite expensive. It can, and we understand that, and that's why we're actually trying to as well. We keep giving out discounts and deals to the Comrades database specifically to try and actually help them in the journey, to try and lower this because we know how important it is, but at the same time, we know how expensive, fueling consistently is. Look, I train a lot. I don't spend a lot on sports nutrition, to be quite honest. I take very, very little. And there's only really 2 to 3 sessions a week that I do. And one session a week is a powder drink, which actually it really lasts me like quite a long time. And then my longer sessions on the weekends is where maybe or quality sessions where I maybe use some gels and stuff like that. But that's about it. I try and you can do it quite finely. And then again, like I said before, you don't always have to rely only on sports nutrition because bananas and potatoes are an option in between. My first comment, should I start slow and finish strong or start strong and finish easy? How about start slow and finish slow? Because then you'll finish the line with a smile. Uh, Even in a marathon, even in any race, you never start off fast. You always go conservatively. And when you're feeling good, you keep feeling good. You never up your game. You just you keep hanging back as long as you possibly can. And that includes getting past that finish line. There's no ways you can start a race of strong and finish strong. And you can't run comrade strong and finish easy. You start off very easy and you will finish hopefully easy. So, like somebody's asked you about combination of products. I think the most important thing when it comes to products is you don't want to create a soup, man. If I like when I say simple, I pick one product, one or two, and I stick to it. I don't like to complicate it. Remember, if I look at like the Race Pro gel, it's a rapidly absorbing gel. It's got a cluster dextrin in it. It rapidly absorbs. It rapidly provides energy. I would never mix that with Endure because Endure is a slow releasing, stability releasing. The one's going to conflict with the other. I stick to the one that is functional for that particular purpose. Endure and the Chews go together. Race Pro drink, Race Pro gels, and the Race Pro, those bars would go together. Uh, you could alternate Race Pro, maybe in intensity gels, but you'd have to split those apart. But never mix a product that's got a specific function with a product that's got a very different function. Don't mix those two together. It's like me telling you to make a vegetable soup, and then you go throw meat and eggs and tuna and chicken and everything into the vegetable soup. You don't want to do that. That will cause absolute havoc. It's one of the biggest mistakes I see. A guy once came to me and he said, listen, I used your snap gels and they really didn't work for me. I don't know what they did. They made me feel terrible. So I said, okay, well, let's analyze everything. If you had stomach issues, let's just analyze what you did. He says, well, before I went to the race, I had a big bowl of oats. On the way to the race, I had a bottle of Endure. About 10 minutes before, about an hour before the race, I had a gel, which wasn't even ours, it was another gel. 10 minutes before the race, I had another gel. And then I had Jelly Babies, and I had Nougat Bars, and then I had Biltong, and then I had a 32 gel Snap Gel, and then I'm like, man, if I tell you to eat a vegetable soup, I mean eat a vegetable soup. Don't go tell me this whole concoction that doesn't make sense. On an average day, if you weren't even running, would you mix all those things into your diet? No. So why do it when the digestive system's under stress? Less is more. So instead of gels, that's where the chews and the bars come in, and Whole Foods, so that makes it more convenient. So if you get nausea from a gel, then you need to avoid them. The Race Pro gel might not be in the same category as other gels because it's more like a drink. It's not thick. It's actually like a liquid and you can drink it. But if that doesn't work and the thick gel doesn't work, then go with Chews, which is a gel replacer, or go with bars that you can eat. That's also fine. Remember, Comrades is not a fast run. Yes, you need to breathe, but you're hopefully going to be running at a comfortable pace where you're not going to be killing yourself unless you're an elite athlete. From a fueling perspective, there's nothing I can say from preventing cramps. Hydration is really the big thing to focus on, but just don't underfuel because that can really mess your energy system up. You can use them, but don't use them at the same time. You've got to if you take the Race Pro Gel, make sure there's 30 minutes between that and the Snap Gel. Don't go and have a Race Pro Gel and then the Snap Gel 5 minutes later. Give it time to go through to get broken down and utilized. Okay. Race Pro Gel and high intensity sports drink. Yes, they could work together. Both of them are very fast releasing and absorbing. So that could work. Can you run Comrades by fueling with gels only? Yes, you can. Can you supplement it with other foods? Yes, you can. You could have a 30-minute sip of the Race Pro Gel, 30 minutes of potato, 30 minutes Race Pro Gel, 30 minutes banana, 30 minutes Snap Gel, 30 minutes banana. I'm just giving you an example, but you can break it up. Just make sure that you know how much you need to take to get in grams per an hour. That's the most important. Oh, by the way, at Comrades, we are giving out Hydrate 1000 sachets. In all the goodie bags, there will be Hydrate 1000 sachets. A lot of people have also asked me where to get it. At the moment, it's online independent. It's rolling out to Discam this week. I think this week it's rolling out to Discam. So just so you know. I don't do well with caffeine drinks. What can I take as a substitute? None of 32GR products have got caffeine at all. Everything is caffeine free except for the G-Shot, but that's a caffeine gel specifically. So somebody said I normally take Race Pro gels and intensity gels, but take them every 30 to 4 minutes. I wouldn't take them I don't know about 4 minutes or maybe you mentioned 40 minutes, but remember, a Race Pro gel, a whole gel is 75 grams. A Snap gel is 21 grams. Depending on how many grams of carbs you take per an hour, you need to make sure that it fits into your fueling strategy. If you want to get to 60 grams of carbs per hour and you're mixing Race Pro and Snap gels, you might take a third of a Race Pro gel at 20 minutes, a Snap gel at 40 minutes, and then another third of the Race Pro gel at 60 minutes. And that would give you just over 60 grams of carbs an hour. If you struggle to eat after 38 kilometers, something you're doing is incorrect. You're either overdoing it or you're underdoing it. You need to train your gut during training. Because if you're only getting to 38, which is like not even marathon distance, then you're really battling. It's like something you're not training your gut properly. You need to try and test this during training, because if you don't, you're really not going to be able to take it to race day. Train low and race high. It's the biggest setup for failure. Your gut doesn't know how to handle what you're going to do on race day. There's no ways you can suddenly go feed yourself on race day. It is a very, very bad carbs if you weigh 115 kilos. You definitely don't. You need as many grams of carbs that you feel comfortable with that supports your energy system. That's really the bottom line. Okay. Sure, most of these are all, like I've covered them in the presentation. Everything here I've covered in the presentation. Okay, look, you're welcome to send emails to me, coach@32gr.com. I'm more than happy to answer those questions. Gluten-free runner relies on gels. Different kettle of fish. Look, none of our products contain gluten, so that's the good news. Everything is gluten-free. And look, a lot of people don't like sweet stuff. I don't like sweet stuff either. Uh, I I like to. So if I take the liquid gel, I definitely have a little bit of water afterwards to just rinse it out. But